Hello guys, my name is Quicky and welcome to this new video, and today I'll be talking about the most overestimated tanks in a game. As you might know, the world of tanks is around for quite a long amount of time, and during that time they introduced many tanks into the game, both real ones and the blueprints. Well, blueprints. So it's kinda obvious that with such a large amount of boxes in the game appeared some balance issues. Some of the tanks were straight up unable to do anything, and some were so OP that they could take down half the enemy team alone. But instead of fixing those balance issues, Wargaming decided to embrace it. Well, tell me how it worked. Still though, they embraced it in such a way that they gave every single tank tree, some OP tanks, some mediocre tanks, and some bad tanks. So even if you're a bad player, you can still have fun by playing a broken ass tank. However, today I won't be talking about those broken tanks, but rather than that about those mediocre or even bad tanks which were just over glorified by either YouTubers liking them or some historical / game events. Now I know that everybody has different opinion and different taste in tanks, so the fact that I dislike a certain tank does not mean that you cannot like it. You may like it or even love it. For example, I just love the toaster and I don't know why. It's such a weak tank, it's still I can't stop playing it. So if I'll call some of your favorite tanks weak, please do not blame me, it won't change my opinion about it. And lastly, just before I'll actually start a video, I have got to say that I won't include any derp tanks as nearly all of them have got a negative win rate. Anyways, let's start this list with possibly the most iconic World War II tank, the Tiger 1. This tank has been an absolute beast in World War II. When it arrived onto the battlefield, it was an indestructible fortress because back then most of the tanks weren't actually designed to destroy other tanks. They were designed to kill infantry while protecting their crew from low caliber guns, you know, with those like 30 millimeters of armor. However, the Tiger was made just for mass destruction of the enemy tanks. It had an outstanding armor for its time and an awesome gun to go with it, while still packing a handful of machine guns. But in this game, it doesn't fight the same league. The tanks it fights against are approximately 5 years younger and thus 5 years more advanced. This obviously means that its originally awesome armor became butter, its previously decent or even the great speed became slow, and possibly the only thing that remained useful is its gun, which as well isn't the greatest because of the heavy tank meta that is in World of Tanks. But we cannot blame Wargaming for everything, since they actually wanted to make Tiger feel more powerful by giving it astonishing 1500 hit points, which is highly above the average on a tier 7. But in my eyes, and probably even yours, that only makes a tank a juicy free money machine for its enemies, kinda like a Talk 2. But despite its numerous weaknesses, this tank is actually one of the most popular tanks in a game. I honestly can't understand how can so many people still play. Like, I get it is a World War II veteran, but even I couldn't play more than 200 games in it and I had to simply go for the Tiger 2. Oh, and since I mentioned the Tiger 2, it is no better. I just didn't want to talk about it because I already mentioned the Tiger 1, so the Tiger 2 would take just another spot and that would be kinda boring, honestly. Either way, let's move on to the second place, which is occupied by the Super Pershing. Now, I've done a full guide on this tank about a week ago, so if you want to get better at playing it despite how weak it is, go and watch it. But now back to the video. Compared to the Tiger 1, I can actually understand why this tank is so popular despite being rather weak. The reason is that it is the cheapest premium tank at a tier 8, costing only, well, only 7,200 gold, but with such a cheap price comes cheap power. The speed of this tank, well, the gun on this tank isn't the greatest considering how slow you are. With 240 alpha damage you can simply trade shots, and if that wasn't enough, you have low armor penetration. So in order to have a great game you must dig into your gold ammunition quite commonly. Yeah, it was buffed from what previously was 170 armor penetration, which was just unplayable, to 192, but that still is not enough to penetrate most of the tier 7, not tier 8, tier 7 heavy. By the way, since we are already talking about the tiers, this tank won't ever meet tier 10 tanks. But honestly, with this armor penetration, tier 9s will feel like tier 10s. Lastly, the armor is finally kinda nice indeed, mainly compared to the Tigers. If you face the enemies frontally, they are very unlikely to penetrate. Add only a little bit of angling and boom, you're impenetrable. Well, as long as you stand against newbies, because despite its strength, it has rather sizable weak spots. And the worst part about it, most of them are on the turret, so you can't even go hull down expecting your armor to reliably hold the shells as you can in, let's say, the Patriot. So if you got the money to buy the SP, don't do it. Buy basically anything else but it. For example, you can get the Ravioli, which, BB Addict warning, earns approximately twice as much money. The first spot is actually taken by two tanks, since they are both really similar in what am I gonna talk about. Both of them are World War II anti-infantry tanks that had tons and tons of modifications. These tanks are the Russian T-34 and the American Sherman. Since they were both anti-infantry tanks, they got the guns that are made primarily for killing infantry and not for destroying tanks. So of course, their guns aren't gonna be good at penetrating tanks. However, we are in World of Tanks, and those guns, in order to be at least mildly competitive, were unrealistically buffed, and are actually the best things about these tanks. The T-34 has the highest DPM of all Tier 5 tanks, held down only by its accuracy, and the Sherman has a really powerful howitzer, held down again by only its accuracy. So yeah, their guns are good, so let's skip to the bad parts. As I said, they were anti-infantry focused tanks, but infantry goes in large groups which will overrun the tanks, so how can you counter that? Isn't it obvious? With large amounts of tanks. These tanks had to be massively produced by tens of thousands, so obviously the Allies couldn't use expensive materials on them. This eventually led to these tanks getting rather weak engines, as you might see in a game. They struggle to get about 30 kilometers per hour, and even if they actually manage to get up to that speed, they can't really do anything with it thanks to low turning speed. Other than that, to make these tanks even less expensive, the armor is rather thin indeed. It has about 50 millimeters of armor in its thickest part. And a reason for it being so thin is that 50 millimeters of armor is more than enough to block those low caliber guns of infantry. So honestly, why would they even put more armor on these tanks if it will only slow them down? They weren't even supposed to fight the tanks anyways, so there was practically nothing capable of penetrating these tanks on their battlefields. But sadly, that is not something you want to hear in a game literally called World of Tanks. Here their armor is nothing. Yeah, you might get a lucky bounce or some nice ricochet, but that definitely is not a reliable kind of defense. If it comes to the guns, yeah, they are good, but who gives a damn about them if you can't do shit with them? As a T-34, you need a lot of armor to actually use your insane DPM. But guess what? You are a freaking paper. And as a Sherman, you get a derp, which is just awesome for a typical hit and run tactic. You know, you greet the enemy, then shove your thick 105mm shell into them and then run away. But nah, you can't do that because the Sherman is just as fast as an average heavy. The fourth tank is a tank that was overglorified thanks to being a favorite of one of the YouTubers. You probably know which one is it. It's a Comet. Now this tank is an amazing and really powerful tank, but on a tier 6, not tier 7. Because on tier 6, its penetration and DPM are actually kinda alright. Overall, it looks as if the wargaming was just like, well, let's put the Cromwell onto tier 7 and only give it like 400 more hit points, so we will see people eating shit and calling it delicious. Like seriously, the Comet is all around same as Cromwell. Same DPM, same alpha, same penetration, and even the same paper armor. Oh, and to make things even worse, the Comet is actually slower than the Cromwell. The only thing in which Comet is better than the Cromwell are the hit points, because it has like 1150 instead of 750. But what about the vertical stabilizer that the Quicky constantly talks about? Well, yeah, it's better to have than not. But still, those 20% of bonus accuracy while moving isn't gonna compensate for the fact that you can't fucking penetrate anything. But you can use it while circling the enemy. Well, you can get through their frontal armor, not even the weak spots, and when you get around them, is there really any chance to, well, not damage them? Other than its poor penetration, this gun has very nice DPM. However, you can't just stick onto the enemy and just overpower them with your raw DPM power because you don't have the armor to do so. Seriously, anything that may hit you on the battlefield will penetrate you, with possibly only some tier 5s being unable to penny your gun mantlet. Lastly, thankfully the speed of this tank is really good. You get 20 horsepower to ton ratio, which is really good, lower than the Chromies, but still good. So all around, if you want to play this tank to have some fun, I did rather recommend the Cromwell to you. Same thing, better matchmaking. And the most overestimated tank, in my opinion, that is currently in a game is the T-44. Russian tier 8 medium tank. Like, alright, I get it. It is a Russian medium tank, so it does have above average armor and great mobility. All of which while having a decent gun. Or does it? The armor is really great compared to overall standard of medium tanks. The red is pretty much impenetrable and the whole armor is about 150mm thick, which which if angled will be about 170 millimeters of effective armor, which is really nice. The mobility is pretty much the same as the Comet, which is as well rather decent, mainly if you consider how thick your armor is. And lastly, the gun. For gun you get two possible options, both of which got some penetration issues. The first option isn't that commonly used, as it is kind of a derpy gun. Plus to that, I said that I'm not gonna talk about derpy things, so let's skip onto the second, more competitive option. This gun is obviously more accurate, has more penetration, which is kinda surprising, and actually has rather decent DPM. Not, well, but if the stats of this tank are great, how can it have 46% win rate? Well, firstly, there are always gonna be some idiots going for a derpy gun because I got 390 alpha damage and I won't hit that thing, and even if I hit it, I'll bounce. Don't judge me, that's my playstyle. It might be your playstyle, but please, I don't wanna suffer with you on my team. Second reason is that its armor is great on paper, but in the actual game, this tank's armor sucks. The impenetrable turret armor is impenetrable only if you directly point it at an enemy, and the whole armor is approximately 170 millimeters thick, which is not gonna bounce a thing at a tier A. Not to mention that even that competitive version of a gun has lowish penetration and kinda lowish DPM. Really the only thing that is good on paper and remains good in game is the speed, which is as well nothing really groundbreaking. If it comes to my personal opinion, this tank is a beast, but only if you play it in a platoon. If you play it alone, you are forced to use that competitive gun, which is, just face it, shit. However, if you are in a platoon and you will use that derpy gun, it is an absolutely amazing tank. There's absolutely nothing more fun than just popping up from behind a Cromwell and just one-shotting the enemy. So all around conclusion, don't play this tank unless you got two other mates. If you wanna play something alone, go for the lightweight instead. Either way, since we are approaching the end of this video, I wanna remind you that first, this is only my opinion. You might have a different one, but shit talking in the comment section that the Sherman is some godlike amazing tank won't change a thing. And second, these are overestimated tanks, not underpowered tanks. Even if I said that some of the tanks are weak, I meant that they are less powerful than they should be if they are so popular. For example, the Comet is really nice tank, but people say that it's some godlike creature capable of doing miracles thanks to the Quicky baby. And then I see some tomato going in 1v4 fight with no chance of succeeding and then flaming his team because, well, Quicky baby's favorite tank must be amazing. Either way, I'm gonna cut the video right here. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that I'll see you next time. Bye! This guy is the biggest comeback that I have seen in the past month or so.